Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I am MK Jabintaj. Today in this video I am giving you the knowledge about the fourth module of the subject Computer Networks and Security. This video is helpful for the 5th SEM CBCS CSC VTU students. I am dedicating this video to all the students all over the world. Now let us see fourth module Network Security. Overview of network security. Network security is a top priority issue in data networks. As communication networks are growing rapidly, security issues have pushed to the forefront of concern for end users, administrators, and equipment suppliers. Despite enormous joint efforts by various groups to develop effective security solutions for networks, hackers continue to pose new serious threats by taking the advantage of weakness present in the internet infrastructure. Elements of network security. Network security is concerned mainly with the following two elements. Confidentiality. Information should be available only to those who have rightful access to it. Authenticity and integrity. The sender of a message and the message itself should be verified at the receiving point. In the figure 10.1, user 1 sends a message, I am a user 1 to the user 2. In part A of the figure, the network lacks any security system, so an intruder can receive the message, change its content to the different message, hi, I am user 1, and send to the user 2. User 2 may not know that this falsified message is really from user 1 authentication and that the content of the message is what user 1 confidentiality. In part B of the figure, a security block is added to each side of the communication and a secret key that only users 1 and 2 would know about it included. Therefore, the message is changed to a form that cannot be altered by the intruder who would be disabled in this communication transaction. See the figures. In general, no protocol or network architecture can ensure full security. Internet routing is based on a distributed system of many routers, switches, and protocols. These protocols have a number of points of vulnerabilities that can be exploited to cause such problems as misdelivery or non-delivery of user traffic, misuse of network resources, network congestion and packet delays, and the violation of the local routing policies. Now let us see threats to the network security. Internet infrastructure attacks are broadly classified into 4 categories as follows: DNS hacking, routing table poisoning, packet mistreatment, denial of service. Among these threats, the first 3 attacks are related to the network infrastructure. Denial of service attacks are related to the end systems. DNS hacking attacks. As mentioned in the chapter 9, the domain name system DNS server is a distributed hierarchical and global directory that translates domain names into numerical IP address. DNS is a critical infrastructure and all hosts contact DNS to access servers and start connections. In the normal mode of operation, hosts and UDP queries to the DNS servers reply with a proper answer or direct the queries to smarter servers. A DNS server also stores information other than host addresses. Name resolution service in the modern internet environment are essential for email transmission, navigation to websites, or data transfer. Thus, an attack on DNS can potentially affect a large portion of the internet. A DNS hacking attack may result in the lack of data authenticity and integrity and can appear in any of the following forms. First, an information level attack forces a server to correspond with other than the correct answer. With cache poisoning, a hacker tricks a remote name server into catching the answer for a third party domain by providing malicious information for the domain's authorized servers. Hackers can then redirect traffic to a pre-selected site. A In a masquerading attack, the adversary poses as a trusted entity and obtain all the secret information in this guise. The attacker can stop any message from being transmitted further, or can change the content or redirect the packet to bogus servers. This action is also known as middleman attack. Third point is the attacker normally sends queries to each host and receives in reply the DNS host name. In an information leakage attack, the attacker sends queries to all hosts and identifies which IP addresses are not used. Later on, the intruder can use those IP addresses to make the other types of the attacks. Once a domain name is selected, it has to be registered. Various tools are available to register domain names over the internet. If the tools are not smart enough, an invader might obtain secure information and use it to hijack the domain. Later in the domain hijacking attack, whenever a user enters a domain address, he or she is forced to enter into the attacker's website. This can be very irritating and can cause a great loss of the internet usage ability. Now let us see routing table poisoning attacks. A routing table poisoning attack is the undesired modification of routing tables. An attacker can do this by maliciously modifying the routing information, update packets sent by router. This is a challenging and important problem as a routing table is the basis of routing in the internet. Any false entry in a routing table could lead to significant consequences such as congestion and overwhelmed host, looping, illegal access to data and network partition. Two types of routing table poisoning attacks are the link attack and the router attack. The link attack occurs when a hacker gets access to a link and thereby intercepts, interrupts or modifies routing messages on the packets. Link attacks act similarly on both the link state and the distance vector protocols. If an attacker succeeds in placing an attack in a link state routing protocol, a router may send incorrect updates about its neighbors or remain silent even if the link state of its neighbor has changed. The attack through a link can be so severe that the attacker can program a router to either drop packets from a victim or readdress packets to a victim, resulting in a lower throughput of the network. Sometimes a router can stop an intended packet from being forwarded further. However, since more than one path to any destination exists, the packet ultimately reaches its destination. Router attacks may affect the link state protocol or even the distance vector protocol. If link state protocol routers are attacked, they become malicious. They may add a non-existing link to the routing table, delete an existing link, or even change the cost of the link. This attack may cause a router to simplify, ignore the updates sent by its neighbors, leading to a serious impact on the operability of the network traffic flow. In the distance vector protocol, an attacker may cause routers to send wrong updates about any node in the network, thereby misleading a router and resulting in the network problems. Most unprotected routers have no way to validate updates. Therefore, both link state and distance vector router attacks are very effective in the distance vector protocol. For example, a malicious router can send wrong information in the form of a distance vector to all its neighbors. A neighbor may not be able to detect this kind of attack and thus proceeds to update its routing table based on wrong distance vectors. The error can in turn be propagated to a great portion of the network before being detected. Packet mistreatment attacks. A packet mistreatment attack can occur during any data transmission. A hacker may capture certain data packets and mistreat them. This type of attack is very difficult to detect. The attack may result in congestion, lowering throughput, and denial of service attacks. Similar to routing table poisoning attacks, packet mistreatment attacks can also be sub-classified into link attacks and router attacks. The link attack causes interruption, modification, or replication of the data packets. A router attack can misroute all packets and may result in congestion or denial of service. Following are some of the examples of a packet mistreatment attack. Interruption. If an attacker intercepts packets, they may not be allowed to be propagated to their destinations, resulting in a lower throughput of the network. This kind of attack cannot be detected easily, as even in normal operations, routers can drop some packets for various reasons. Modification. Attackers may succeed in accessing the content of the packet while in transit and change its content. They can then change the address of the packet or even change its data. To solve this kind of problem, a digital signature mechanism discussed later in this chapter can be used. Replication. An attacker might trap a packet and replay it. This kind of attack can be detected by using the sequence number of each packet. Ping of death. An attacker may send a ping message which is large and therefore must be fragmented for transport. The receiver then starts to reassemble the fragments. As the ping fragments arrive, the total packet length becomes too large and might cause a system crash. Malicious misrouting of packets. A hacker may attack a router and change its routing table, resulting in misrouting of the data packets, causing a denial of service. Now let us see denial of service attacks. A denial of service attack is a type of security breach that prohibits a user from accessing normally provided services. The denial of service does not result in information theft or any kind of the information loss, but can nonetheless be very dangerous, as it can cost the target person a large amount of time and money. Denial of service attacks affect the destination rather than data packets or router. Usually a denial of service attack affects a specific network services such as email or DNS. For example, such an attack may overwhelm the DNS server in various ways and make it inoperable. One way of initiating this attack is by causing the buffer overflow. Inserting an executable code inside memory can potentially cause a buffer overflow, or an adversary may use various tools to send large numbers of queries to a DNS server, which then is not able to provide services in a timely manner. Denial of service attacks are easy to generate but difficult to detect. They take important servers out of the action for few hours, thereby denying service to all users. There are yet a few other situations that can cause this kind of attack, such as UDP flood, TCP flood, and ICMP flood. In all these attacks, the hackers' main aim is to overwhelm victims and disrupt service provided to them. Now let us see denial of service attacks are two types. Single source. An attacker sends a large number of packets to a target system to overwhelm and disable it. These packets are designed such that their real sources cannot be identified, distributed. In this type of attack, a large number of hosts are used to flood unwanted traffic to a single target. The target cannot then be accessible to other users in the network as it is processing the flood of traffic. The flood may be either a UDP flood or a TCP sync flood. UDP flooding is used against two target systems and can stop the services offered by either system. Hackers link the UDP character generating services of the system to another one by sending UDP packets with spoofed return addresses. This may create an infinite looping between the two systems, leading to the system uselessness. Normally, a sync packet is sent by a host to the user who intends to establish a connection. The user then sends back an acknowledgement. In the TCP sync flood, a hacker sends a large number of sync packets to a target user. Since the return addresses are spoofed, the target user queues up a sync or a packet and never processes it. Therefore, the target system keeps on waiting. The result may be a hard disk crash or reboot. Now let us say security methods. Common solutions that can protect computer communication networks from attacks are classified as cryptographic techniques or cryptographic techniques are authentication techniques. Verification means authentication techniques. Cryptographic techniques. Cryptography has a long and fascinating history. Centuries ago, cryptography was used as a tool to protect national secrets and strategies. Today, network engineers focus on cryptography methods for computer communication networks. Cryptography is the process of transferring a piece of information or message shared by two parties into some sort of the code. The message is scrambled before transmission so that it is undetectable by outside watchers. This kind of message needs to be decoded at the receiving end before any further processing. The main tool that network security experts are using to encrypt a message is a secret key. The fundamental operation often used to encrypt a message is the exclusive, or suppose that we have one bit M and a secret bit K. A simple encryption is carried out using M XOR K. To decrypt this message, the second party, if he or she has the key K, can easily detect M by performing the following. In the computer communication networks, data can travel between two users while it is encrypted. As shown in the figure 10.2, two users are exchanging data while two types of the encryption devices are installed in their communication network. The first encryption device is end-to-end encryption, whereby secret coding is carried out at both end systems. In this figure, severe A encodes its data, which can be decoded only at the other end server. The second phase of the encryption is link encryption, which secures all the traffic passing over that link. See the figure 10.2 overview of encryption points in a communication network. The two types of encryption techniques are secret key encryption and public key encryption. In a secret key model, both sender and receiver conventionally use the same key for an encryption process. In a public key model, a sender and a receiver each use a different key. The public key system is more powerful than the secret key system and provides better security and message privacy, but the biggest drawback of public key encryption is speed. The public key system is significantly more complex computationally and may not be practical in many cases. Hence, the public key system is used only to establish a session to exchange a session key. Then this session key is used in a secret key system of encrypting messages for the duration of the session. Now let us see authentication techniques. Encryption methods offer the assurance of message confidentiality. However, a network system must be able to verify the authenticity of the message and the sender of the message. These forms of security techniques in a computer networks are known as authentication techniques and are categorized as authentication with message digest and authentication with digital signature. Message authentication protects a user in a network against data falsification and ensures data integrity. These methods do not necessarily use keys. Secret key encryption protocols. Secret key encryption protocols, sometimes known as asymmetric encryption, a single key encryption protocols are conventional encryption models. They typically consist of an encryption algorithm, a key, a description algorithm. At the end point, the encrypted message is called ciphertext. Several standard mechanisms can be used to implement a secret key encryption algorithm. Here we focus on two protocols: data encryption standard and advanced encryption standards. In these algorithms, a shared secret key between a transmitter and a receiver is assigned at the transmitter and receiver points. The encryption algorithm produces a different key at any time for a specific transmission. Changing the key changes the output of the algorithm. At the receiving end, the encrypted information can be transferred back to the original data by using a decryption algorithm and the same key that was used for encryption. The security of the conventional encryption depends on the secrecy of the key, not on the secrecy of the encryption algorithm. Consequently, the algorithm need not be kept secret, only the key has to be secret. Now let us see data encryption standards. With the data encryption standards, plain text messages are converted into 64-bit blocks, each encrypted using a key. The key length is 64 bits but contains only 56 usable bits. Thus, the last bit of each 8 byte in the key is a parity bit for the corresponding byte. DES consists of 16 identical rounds of an operation as shown in the figure 10.3. The details of the algorithm on each 64-bit block of message at each round I of operation as follows. See the figure. Now let us see begin DES algorithm. Initialize before round 1 begins. All 64 bits of an incoming message and all 56 bits of the secret key are separately permuted, shuffled. Each incoming 64-bit message is broken into two 32-bit halves denoted by LI and RI respectively. The 56 bits of the key are also broken into two 28-bit halves, and each half is rotated 1 or 2 bit positions depending on the round. All 56 bits of the key are permuted, producing version ki of the key on round I. In this step is a logical exclusive OR and the description of the function f appears next. Then Li and Ri are determined by, see the figure 10.2. Li is equal to Ri minus 1 and see the figure 10.3. Ri is equal to Li minus 1 XR f of Ri minus 1 comma Ki. All 64 bits of the message are permuted. The operation function f at any round I of DES is as follows. Out of 52 bits of Ki, function f chooses 48 bits. The 32-bit Ri-1 is expanded from 32 bits to 48 bits so that it can be combined with 48-bit Ki. The expansion of Ri-1 is carried out by first breaking Ri-1 into 8 4-bit chunks and then expanding each chunk by copying the leftmost bit and the rightmost bit from left and right adjacent chunks respectively. Function f also partitions the 48 bits of ki into 8 6-bit chunks. The corresponding 8 chunks of Ri-1 and 8 chunks of ki are combined as follows. See the figure 10.4. Ri-1 is equal to Ri-1 XOR ki. At the receiver, the same steps and the same keys are used to reverse the encryption. It is now apparent that 56-bit key length may not be sufficient to provide full security. This argument is still controversial. Triple DES provides a solution for this controversy. These three keys are used for a total of 168 bits. It should also be mentioned that DES can be implemented more efficiently in hardware than in software. Now let us see advanced encryption standard. An advanced encryption standard AES protocol has a better security strength than DES. AES supports 128-bit symmetric block messages and uses 128 minus, 192 minus, R256-bit keys. The number of rounds in AES is variable from 10 to 14 rounds depending on the key and block sizes. Figure 10.4 illustrates the encryption overview of this protocol using 128-bit key. There are 10 rounds of encryptions for the key size of 128 bits. All rounds are identical except for the last round, which has no mix column stage. Overview of a advanced encryption standard protocol. See the figure here. A single block of 128-bit plain text 16 bytes as an input arrives from the left. The plain text is formed as 16 bytes M0 through M15 and is fed into a round 1 after an initialization stage. In this round, substitute units indicated by S in the figure performs a byte by byte substitution of blocks. The ciphers in the form of rows and columns move through a permutation stage to shift rows to mix columns. At the end of this round, all 16 blocks of ciphers are exclusive or read with the 16 bytes of round 1 key K0 of 1 through K15 of 1. The 128-bit key is expanded for 10 rounds. The AES decryption algorithm is fairly simple and is basically the reverse of the encryption algorithm. At each stage of a round, all stages of each round are reversible. Now let us see public key encryption protocols. The introduction of public key encryption brought a revolution to the field of cryptography. Public key cryptography provided a very clever method for key exchange. In the public key encryption model, a sender or receiver pair uses different keys. This model is sometimes known as asymmetric or two-key or encryption. Public key algorithm is based on mathematical functions rather than on substitution or permutation. Although the security of any encryption scheme indeed depends on the length of the key and the computational work involved in breaking an encrypted message, several public key encryption protocols can be implemented. Among them, the following two protocols are the focus of our study: Revert, Shamir and Alderman RSA protocol, Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol. In the public key encryption methods, either of the two related keys can be used for encryption, the other one for decryption. It is computationally infeasible to determine the decryption key given only the algorithm and the encryption key. Each system using this encryption method generates a pair of keys to be used for encryption and decryption of the message that it will receive. Each system publishes its encryption key by placing it in a public register or file and sorts out the key as a public one. The companion key is kept private. If A wishes to send a message to B, A encrypts the message by using B's public key. On receiving the message, B decrypts it with the private B key. No other recipient can decrypt the message since only B knows its private key. This way, public key encryption secures an incoming communication as long as a system controls its private key. However, public key encryption has extra computational overhead and is more complex than the conventional one. Now let us see RSA algorithm. Revert, Shamir and Alderman developed the Shamir and Alderman developed the RSA public key encryption and signature scheme. This was the first practical public key encryption algorithm. RSA is based on the interactability of the factoring large integers. Assume that a plain text M must be encrypted to a ciphertext C. The RSA algorithm has three phases of this: key generation, encryption and decryption. Key generation. In the RSA scheme, the key length is typically 512 bits, which requires an enormous computational power. A plain text is encrypted in blocks, with each block having a binary value less than some number n. Encryption and decryption are done as follows, beginning with the generation of a public key and a private key. Begin key generation algorithm. Choose two roughly 256-bit prime numbers A and B and drive n is equal to a. B. A number is prime if it has factors of 1 and itself. Find x, select encryption key x such that x and a minus 1 into b minus 1 are relatively prime. Two numbers are relatively prime if they have no common factor greater than 1. Find y, calculate the decryption key y. See the figure 10.5. xy mod a minus 1 into a b minus 1 is equal to 1. At this point, a and b can be discarded. The public key is equal to x comma n, the private key is equal to y comma n. In this algorithm, x and y are known to both sender and receiver, but only the receiver must know y. Also, a and b must be large and about the same size and both greater than 1024 bits. The larger these two values, the more secure the encryption. Now let us see encryption. Both sender and receiver must know the value of n. The sender knows the value of x and only the receiver knows the value of y. Thus, this is a public key encryption with the public key x comma n and the private key y comma n. Given m is lesser than n, ciphertext C is constructed by, see the figure 10.6. C is equal to m to the power of x mod n. Note here that if A and B are chosen to be on the order of 1024 bits, n is approximately equal to 2048. Thus, we are not able to encrypt a message longer than 256 characters. Now, let us see decryption. Given the ciphertext C, the plain text M is extracted by 10.7. C figure m is equal to c to the power of y mod n. In reality, the calculation require a math library as numbers are typically huge. One can see easily how equations 10.6 and 10.7 work. See the example here. For an RSA encryption of a 4-bit message of 1000 or m is equal to 9, we choose a is equal to 3 and b is equal to 11. Find the public and private keys for the security action and show the ciphertext. Solution. Clearly, n is equal to a, b is equal to 33. We select x is equal to 3, which is relatively prime. A minus 1 into a, b minus 1 is equal to 20. Then from xy mod a minus 1 into b minus 1 is equal to 3y mod 20 is equal to 1. We can get y is equal to 7. Consequently, the public key and the private key should be 3,33 and 7,33 respectively. If we encrypt the message, we get c is equal to m to the power of x mod n is equal to 9 cube mod 33 is equal to 3. The decryption process is the reverse of this action, as m is equal to c to the power of 5 mod n is equal to 3 to the power of 7 mod 33 is equal to 9. Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol. In the Diffie-Hellman key exchange protocol, two end users can agree on the shared secret and shared secret code without any information shared in advance. Thus, intruder would not be able to access the transmitted communication between the two users or discover the shared secret code. This protocol is normally used for virtual private network explained in the chapter 16. The essence of this protocol for two users 1 and 2 is as follows. Suppose that user 1 selects a prime a random integer number x1 and a generator g and creates y1 1 comma 2 comma up to a minus 1 such that y1 is equal to g to the power of x1 mod a. In practice, two end users agree on a and g ahead of time. User 2 performs the same function and creates y2. y2 is equal to x to the g to the power of x2 mod a. User 1 then sends y1 to the user 2. Now user 1 forms its key k1 using the information its partner sent as k1 is equal to y2 to the power of x1 mod a, and user 2 forms its key k2 using the information its partner sent it as k2 is equal to y1 to the power of x2 mod a. It can easily be proved that the two keys key1 and key2 are equal. Therefore, the two users can now encrypt their messages, each using its own key created by the other one's information. Now let us see authentication. Authentication techniques are used to verify identity. Message authentication verifies the authenticity of both the message content and the message sender. Message content is authenticated through implementation of a hash function and encryption of the resulting message digest. The sender's authenticity can be implemented by use of a digital signature. A common technique for authenticating a message is to implement a hash function which is used to produce a fingerprint of a message. The hash value is added at the end of the message before transmission. The receiver recomputes the hash value from the received message and compares it to the received hash value. If the two hash values are the same, the message was not altered during transmission. Once a hash function is applied on a message m, the result is known as message digest or h of m. The hash function has the following properties. Unlike the encryption algorithm, the authentication algorithm is not required to be reversible. Given a message digest h of m, it is computationally infeasible to find m. It is computationally infeasible to find two different messages m1 and m2 such that h of m1 is equal to h of m2. Message authentication can be implemented by two methods. In the first method, as shown in the figure 10.5a, a hash function is applied on a message and then a process of encryption is implemented. Thus, a message digest can also be encrypted. In this method, at this stage, the encryption can be a public key or a secret key. The authenticity of a message in this method is assured only if the sender and the receiver share the encryption key at the receiver side. This receiving user has to decrypt the received message digest and compare it with the one made locally at its site for any judgment on the integrity of the message. See the figure 10.5, message authentication combined with encryption and use of a hash function. In the second method as shown in the figure 10.5b, no encryption is involved in the process of message authentication. This method assumes that the two parties share a secret key, hence at the receiving side the comparison is made between the received H of M and the message digest made locally from the received message. This technique is more popular in the security infrastructure of the Internet Protocol. Among the message authentication protocols are the MD5 hash algorithm and secure hash algorithm. Secure hash algorithm is the focus of our discussion. Now let us see secure hash algorithm SHA. The secure hash algorithm SHA was proposed as a part of the digital signature standards SHA-1. The first version of this standard takes a message with a maximum length of 2 to the power of 24 and produces a 160-bit digest. With this algorithm, SHA-1 uses 5 registers R1 through R5 to maintain a state of 20 bytes. The first step is to pad a message M with length LM. The message length is forced to LM is equal to 448 and mod 512. In other words, the length of the padded message becomes 64 bits less than the multiple of 512 bits. The number of padding bits can be as low as 1 bit and as high as 512 bits. The padding includes 1 bit and as many 0 bits are as required. Therefore, the least significant 64 bits of the message length are appended to convert the padded message to a word with a multiple of 512 bits. After padding, the second step is to expand each block of 512 bit 1632 bits words M0 up to M15 to words of 8032 bit using WI is equal to MI for 0 is lesser than or equal to I is lesser than or equal to 15 and WI is equal to WI minus 3 XR, WI minus 8 XR, WI minus 14 XR, WI minus 16, 1 for 16 less than or equal to I less than or equal to 79, where this J means left rotation by J bits. This way bits are shifted several times. If the incoming block is mixed with the state, next bits from each block of WI are mixed into the state in 4 steps, each maintaining 20 rounds for any values of A, B, and C. And bit number I, we define a function fi of A, B, C as follows. See the function description here. Then the 80 steps I is equal to 0 to up to 79 of the 4 rounds are described as follows. See the here equations, where Ci is a constant value specified by the standard for a round I. The message digest is produced by concatenation of the values in R1 through R5 authentication and digital signature. A digital signature is one of the most important required security measures. Much like a person's signature on a document, a digital signature on the message is required for the authentication and identification of the right sender. The digital signature is supposed to be unique to an individual and serves as a means of identifying the sender. An electronic signature is not as easy as it was with the paper-based system. The digital signature requires a great deal of study, research and skill. Even if these requirements are met, there is no guarantee that all the security requirements have been met. The technical method of providing a sender's authentication is performed through cryptography. Many cryptographic mechanisms have been developed. Among them, RSA algorithm implements both encryption and digital signature. When RSA is applied, the message is encrypted with the sender's private key. Thus, the entire encrypted message serves as a digital signature. This means that at the receiving end, the receiver can decrypt it using the public key. This authenticates the authenticates that the packet comes from the right user. Now let us see firewalls. As the name suggests, a firewall protects data from the outside world. A firewall can be a software program or hardware device. A firewall is a popular security mechanism for networks. A firewall is a simple router implemented with a special program. This unit is placed between hosts of a certain network and outside world as shown in the figure 10.8 and the rest of the network. The security issues faced by a smaller network like the one used at home are similar to large networks. A firewall is used to protect the network from unwanted websites and potential hackers. See the figure. A firewall is placed on the link between a network router and the internet or between a user and a router. The objective of such configuration is to monitor and filter packets coming from unknown sources. Consequently, hackers do not have access to penetrate through a system. If a firewall protects the system for a large company with many small networks, the firewall is placed on every connection attached to the internet. Companies can set rules about how their networks or particular systems need to work in order to maintain security. Companies can also set rules on how a system can connect to websites. These precautionary rules are followed in order to attain the advantage of having a firewall. Hence, the firewall can control how a network works with an internet connection. A firewall can also be used to control data traffic. Now let us see software firewall programs can be installed in home computers by using an internet connection with those so-called gateways. The computer with such a software can access web servers only through this software firewall, but hardware firewalls are more secure than software firewalls. Moreover, hardware firewalls are not expensive. Some firewalls also offer virus protection. The biggest security advantage of installing a firewall is in a business network is to protect from any outsider logging on to the network under protection. Firewalls are preferred for use in almost all network security infrastructures as they allow the implementation of a security policy in one centralized place rather than end-to-end. Sometimes a firewall is put where a large amount of data follow is normally expected. A firewall controls the flow of traffic by one of the following three methods. The first method is packet filtering. Apart from forwarding packets between networks, a firewall filters those packets that pass through. If packets can get through the filter, they reach their destinations, otherwise they are discarded. A firewall can be programmed to throw away certain packets as addressed to a particular IP host or TCP port number. This condition is especially useful if a particular host does not want to respond to any access from an external source. The second method is that a firewall filters packets based on the source IP address. This filtering is helpful when a host has to be protected from any unwanted external packets. The third method, denial of service, was explained earlier. This method controls the number of packets entering a network. Internet routing is based on a distributed system of many routers, switches, and protocols. These protocols have a number of points of vulnerabilities that can be exploited to cause such problems as misdelivery or non-delivery of user traffic, misuse of network resources, network congestion and packet delays, and the violation of local routing policies.